The snow came early that year. It wasn't a storm, just a quiet, steady fall that dusted the earth like ash from an old fire. It crept over the rooftops of Timber Hollow, muted the sound of boots on wooden porches, and clung to the fur collars of passing strangers. The town was small, tucked into the folds of Montana's southern ridges, where law rode slow and judgment came quick. That morning, Clara Wynne stood at the edge of town with nothing but a coat that no longer buttoned over her stomach. Her hair clung to her cheeks, wet from melting flakes. She didn't cry. Not yet. The sheriff's words still rang in her ears. "You're not welcome here, Clara. We let you stay out of pity, but you're bringing shame now." Shame. That's what they called it. They didn't ask who the father was. They didn't ask why she hadn't gone east to find family, or where she slept since the schoolhouse locked its doors. All they saw was her rounded belly beneath wool and her silence when they demanded names. She kept his name buried deep, not out of fear, but to protect what little remained of him in her memory. They said he was an outlaw, that he shot a banker during a botched escape and vanished into the canyons. No one cared that before that he was a soldier, a sergeant, that his hands once carried wounded men across fire-slick fields, not pistols. But the West was not a place for stories like hers. She shuffled down the main road, past shuttered saloons and still glowing oil lamps, each light flickering like a last apology. The snow thickened. Behind her, doors shut one by one. Only the church bell tolled, lonely and hollow, like a prayer gone unanswered. And so Clara Wynne disappeared into the white, carrying a life inside her, and a name she dared not speak aloud. Somewhere far from Timber Hollow, a man rode through the valley dust. His name was Elias Cole, though few used it. To most, he was just the hunter. He rode alone, spoke rarely, and delivered the dead or wanted with the same precision he once used to disarm landmines during the war, a shadow stitched to his saddle. He carried no tin star, only the worn leather satchel with bounty slips, faces sketched in charcoal, crimes listed in ink, payouts promised at the bottom. Justice wasn't blind out here. It was bought, sold, and carried on horseback. Elias rarely asked who deserved what, until one day he did. That day came when he unrolled a slip by the fire in an old stagecoach stop. The wind howled outside, dry and cruel, but inside the fire cracked softly. The bounty sheet trembled slightly in his hand. The name read, Jonas Riker, dead or alive, $600. There was a photograph, old, faded, but Elias recognized the man. Jonas had been in his regiment. They'd shared fires, foxholes, and near-death confessions. He'd once saved Elias's life outside El Paso by dragging him through smoke with 2 bullets in his own gut. But the bounty didn't care for history. Worse, the note at the bottom chilled Elias more than the snow ever could. Last seen near Timber Hollow. Might be traveling with a woman, possibly pregnant. He read that line twice, and the past he'd buried beneath bullet shells and broken contracts clawed its way to the surface. Because years ago, before the uniform, before the blood, Clara Wynne was just his little sister, and he had buried her too, at least in his mind. She had been 15 when he went to war, 17 when the letter came back. Missing in action, presumed dead. Their parents never recovered. Their homestead burned a year later. Elias never returned, not until now. Not until her name rose from the ashes, not on paper, but between the lines. He packed his things that night and rode before dawn, not toward the bounty, but toward something far more fragile. Redemption. The sound of a branch cracking woke her. Clara bolted upright on the cot, hand instinctively wrapped around her belly, as if to shield the child from what might come through the wind. Outside, the storm had died. leaving behind only soft flurries in a world draped in quiet. She moved slowly toward the window, her knees stiff from cold. Her breath fogged the glass. A rider, tall in the saddle, broad-shouldered, hat low, coat dusted white. No lawman's badge glittered on his chest, just a worn scarf, tied loose at the throat, and a revolver strapped to one hip like it belonged there more than his own name. Clara didn't breathe. He was close enough now that she could make out the scar along his jawline, the slight limp in his gait as he dismounted. The horse gave a soft snort, stomping at the snow, and then he looked up at the cabin window. And time, years of silence, of loss, of not knowing, shattered like river ice beneath spring boots. It was Elias, her brother, alive. She stumbled back from the window, mouth open, but no sound came. Her chest felt like it might split in two. Elias stepped onto the porch without knocking. When she opened the door, she forgot to speak. So did he. For a moment, the silence between them was louder than all the winds of winter. Finally, he said quietly, "I heard you were here." Her voice cracked. "They said you were dead." He gave a small shrug. "For a while, I thought I was." She looked thinner than he remembered. Pale, strong but frayed at the edges like a flag left too long in the wind. Her coat strained over her belly, but she stood tall. He noticed the rifle leaning near the hearth, loaded. "Smart girl." "I didn't come for a fight," he added. "I didn't ask if you did." They stared at each other, brother and sister, standing on the same porch where their father once tied wild mustangs and their mother braided Clara's hair under summer skies. But this wasn't home, and they weren't the same. "I've got coffee," she said finally. He nodded once and stepped inside. The cabin was barely more than 4 walls and a stove, but it smelled like warmth. Dried herbs hung above the hearth. A tin pot simmered on the coals. It was the kind of place built to survive, not be admired. She poured 2 mugs and sat across from him. "I saw your name on a bounty slip," Elias said. Clara froze. "It wasn't yours," he clarified quickly. "It was his." Her fingers tightened around the mug. "You knew," she said. He didn't answer. "I never said his name out loud," she whispered. "Not once. Not even when they threw me out of town. I thought if I protected his name, maybe God would protect the rest." Elias watched the flames dance between them. "I don't judge you," he said, "but I need to know something." She nodded slowly. "Did he love you?" Clara's eyes welled, but she didn't blink. "He used to bring me prairie flowers in his saddlebag," she said. "Even when he'd been shot at. Even when he hadn't eaten in days. He carved a cradle before we ever knew if the child would live. So yes, he loved me. More than anyone ever has." Elias leaned back in the chair, one hand resting on his thigh where the old wound still throbbed in the cold. "You know what they say he did," he murmured. "I know," she said, "but he didn't kill that man. I was there, Elias. He was running, yes. But the banker was shot by another outlaw. Jonas tried to help him." "You sure?" "I saw it." Elias rubbed his face. The fire crackled louder between them. "You still love him?" he asked finally. She looked him dead in the eye. "Enough to raise his child in a world that spits at her every morning." He stared at her, then nodded, and for the first time since stepping through that door, his shoulders dropped slightly. "I came to find you," he said. "Not him." She blinked. "I'm not taking any bounty." Tears welled up then, not because she was weak, but because the only person left who shared her blood had just offered her something rarer than gold out here. Safety. Later that night, Elias stood outside, smoking. The sky had cleared into stars so sharp they looked etched. His horse stood quiet, steaming breath curling upward. He saw them before they arrived. 2 riders, no lanterns. moving slow. He slipped behind the post, hand resting on his revolver. Clara opened the door quietly. "I see them too," she whispered. "Friends of his?" Elias asked. "Enemies," she said. "He told me if anyone came without speaking first, it meant they weren't from our side." He nodded, then stepped off the porch and into the snow like he was walking into an old wound. He didn't draw yet, but they did. The first shot rang out and missed. Elias didn't. 2 flashes, 2 thuds, 1 cry, and then silence. Clara's breath caught as she clutched her belly, but Elias came back through the door with calm in his eyes. "They weren't here to talk," he said. She didn't ask who they were. She didn't want to know. "Time to move," Elias said. "Where?" "Somewhere they won't find you." "You're coming?" "You think I'd leave you now?" She looked at him, and despite everything, despite the storm, the outlaws, the wounds, the grief, Clara Wynne smiled, for the first time in months. By dawn, they had packed everything worth taking. A blanket lined with stitched horses, the old tin kettle, dried beans in a sack. Elias loaded her belongings onto the mule in silence, only stopping once to tighten his gloves as Clara stepped out of the cabin, the door closing behind her like the end of a chapter. She didn't look back. There was no point. The smoke curling from the chimney would vanish by midday, and the wind would sweep the porch clean. That place was never meant to be permanent. Just a pause, a breath. Now the storm had passed. It was time to move again. Clara mounted with a wince. Her belly made riding awkward now. Elias noticed and offered his hand. She refused it, not out of pride, but because she still hadn't learned how to lean on someone again. He respected that. The snow crunched beneath hooves as they entered the pine forest. Here, the light was blue and dim. The trees stood like solemn witnesses, tall and silent, holding the weight of winter in their branches. "You got a plan?" she asked as the wind picked up again. "Not yet," Elias said, "but north is quieter. We can head toward Copper Flats. I know a rancher up there who owes me." "Owes you what?" "My life," Clara smirked slightly. "Sounds familiar." Elias looked sideways at her. "He was a better shot than me that day." Clara shifted in the saddle. "And what are you now?" "A man trying not to be what I was." She didn't reply, because she knew exactly what that felt like. They made camp near an abandoned way station. Half-burned timbers, a well that still gave water if you were patient. Elias started a fire, while Clara huddled inside what was left of a stable. The child kicked again, soft, steady. She pressed her hand to her stomach and whispered, "Not yet, sweetheart. We're not home yet." Elias joined her with 2 tin mugs of boiled water and a can of salted venison. Clara ate slowly. Her lips chapped, eyes dark from lack of sleep. "You ever kill a man you didn't mean to?" she asked softly. Elias didn't look up. "Yes," he said. "You regret it?" "Every morning." She stared at the flames. "Then why keep doing this?" He turned to her. "Because I'd rather chase devils than become one again." Silence fell again, until a crack of a twig snapped them alert. Elias had his gun drawn before standing, but what stepped into the firelight wasn't a man. It was a woman, thin, wrapped in layers of fur, her hair white, her eyes sharp as needles. "I smelled the smoke," she said. "Didn't think anyone'd be fool enough to light a fire this close to outlaw trails." Elias lowered the gun slowly. "And you?" "I ain't afraid of outlaws. Been one myself." Clara raised a brow. The woman smiled without joy. "Name's Maybelle. You?" "Clara," she said. Elias only gave a nod. Maybelle crouched by the fire, warming her hands. "You headed north?" "Yeah," Elias replied. "Then you'll want to stay off the river pass. 2 bounty crews already killed each other over a fella named Jonas." She looked at Clara now. You know the name? Clara's fingers clenched around her blanket. I heard of him, she said carefully. Maybelle's gaze lingered too long. She knew. Somehow, she knew. But she didn't say it out loud. Funny thing about legends, Maybelle said. Sometimes the man dies, and the story don't. With that she stood. I'll be gone by dawn. Don't follow my trail. Ain't friendly after me. Then she disappeared into the trees as quietly as she came. Clara stared into the fire. She knew. Elias nodded. But she let it lie. Why? Because even ghosts get tired of hunting the living. By the time they reached the edge of Copper Flats, the snow had turned to mud. Spring came late here, and mean. Trees wept with meltwater, and the road was marked with wagon ruts and boot prints. Elias pulled up near the edge of a gully. Below, the town lay in shades of brown and rust. Smoke curled from chimneys. Dogs barked in alleyways. And on the saloon wall, nailed under a cracked horseshoe, were posters: Wanted, Reward, Jonas Keller, Dead or Alive. Clara turned away before she saw the price on his head. I can't hide here, she said. You won't have to. Elias led her up the ridge where the land sloped into red dirt and scrub. At the far end of the valley stood a small ranch house, fenced, modest, with horses in the pen and laundry flapping like prayer flags on the line. Who lives there? She asked. Wade Harper, former Pinkerton. Shot twice in the gut and decided to retire. You trust him? He saved me once, Elias said, then never asked for anything back. That was rare and precious. Wade welcomed them with a firm handshake and a look at Clara's belly that held no judgment, only tired understanding. You need a roof. It's yours, Wade said. Don't ask questions I don't want answered. That night, Clara slept in a bed with clean sheets and a lamp on the table, and when she dreamed, it wasn't of gallows or gunshots, but of warm hands cradling her face. Jonas, smiling, alive. 2 days later, Elias found it while oiling his rifle. A letter, folded carefully, hidden deep in his old saddlebag. His breath caught when he saw the handwriting. It wasn't Clara's. It was Jonas's. Elias, if you ever find her, don't bring her back to me. I won't be where you left me. I made choices, brother. You made yours. But if she's alive, and the child too, tell them I love them more than I love breathing. That's all that matters now. Jonas. Elias stared at the page until the ink blurred. He hadn't even known Jonas could write. Later that night, he sat beside Clara on the porch and handed it to her. She read it without blinking, without crying. Just held it to her chest for a long while, then whispered, Then he's already gone. Elias didn't lie, but he said softly, Even gone, men can leave something good behind. And for the first time, she believed it. The days at Wade Harper's ranch passed in a hush. Clara's belly grew heavier, her steps slower. She would sit on the back porch in the evening, listening to the wind weave through cottonwoods, eyes half closed, hands resting gently where the child turned beneath her ribs. Elias kept his gun close, not out of habit, out of certainty. He had lived too long to believe peace came without a price. Every hour they went unseen was a debt waiting to be paid. He patrolled the fence line every morning, checked the road at dusk, slept light, boots near the door. Clara noticed. She didn't ask. One afternoon, as she hung a shirt to dry, she asked instead, Do you think Jonas meant what he wrote? Elias paused mid-step. I think he wrote it because he knew he wouldn't get to say it. Clara nodded quietly. He never wanted to be a father, but I think, when it happened, something inside him changed. Elias glanced up. It did. How do you know? Because when he talked about dying, he started calling it losing time, like he wanted more of it, with someone. Clara's eyes stung. She blinked the heat away. They both knew Jonas had likely been gone long before the letter was ever read, but neither said it, because sometimes the dead lived on, not in graves, but in the unborn, and the ones left trying to make sense of everything broken. The trouble didn't come from the road, it came from the ridge. Three men, dark as shadows against the late sun, watched the ranch from above. Wade saw them first, through a spyglass. "Don't recognize 'em," he muttered to Elias, handing over the glass. "But the one with the coat? That's Army issue. Stolen or left behind, either way, they ain't riding casual." Elias studied them. The horses were lean, fast, packed light. No saddlebags, just rifles. And one man with a brass spyglass of his own. "They ain't bounty hunters," Wade said. "They're ghosts." "What do you mean?" "Bounty men ask questions. These fellas, they already know the answers." Elias didn't sleep that night. He stayed on the porch, shotgun across his lap, moonlight slicing through the fence rails like prison bars. At dawn, they were gone. But the feeling remained. A tightening. A hush before a strike. Clara asked, "What do we do?" Elias replied, "We don't run. But if they're after you, they're not. Not yet." He looked her in the eye. "They're after anyone tied to Jonas." Her hand went to her belly. That was when they knew running would only delay it. They had to finish what Jonas started. Wade opened his cellar that night. Inside were things he hadn't touched in 10 years. An old Henry rifle, a bottle of whiskey so dark it looked like blood, and a leather pouch of documents wrapped in oilcloth. He handed the pouch to Elias. "What's this?" "Jonas's real name," Wade said. "And the contract that made him a target." Elias opened it. He stared at the pages. It wasn't a bounty. It was a ledger. Names, deals, corrupt deputies, smuggling, kidnapping, a judge's signature at the bottom, and Jonas's name right there, not as a criminal, but as a witness. "He was going to testify," Elias whispered. "He was the only one who could," Wade said. "He ran not because he was guilty. He ran because they marked him." "And you kept this?" "He gave it to me before disappearing, told me to burn it if he didn't come back in 3 months." "Why didn't you?" "Because the fire can't fix everything," Wade said quietly. "But sometimes a name can." Clara stood in the doorway, pale and still. "You mean to tell me? He died because he was trying to clean up this mess?" Elias nodded, and something broke in her then. Not grief, something harder, older, resolve. They came at dusk. 4 horses this time. One man had a star-shaped scar across his jaw. Another wore a preacher's coat. The last 2 rode with rifles across their chests and spurs that never rang. They didn't knock, just sat their horses on the edge of the fence and waited. Elias stepped out first. The man with the scar called out, "We're not here for blood." "Could have fooled me," Elias said. "We just want the girl, the witness, the child." Elias shook his head. "He's dead. Then it dies with him. That's not justice." The man smiled. "Justice? No, son. This is insurance." Behind him, Clara stepped into view. "I'll go," she said. "No," Elias said sharply. "I won't let you die for this. Not again." The man with the scar watched them like a vulture. "That's sweet," he said. "But we ain't asking." And then everything moved. A gun cocked, a flash from the ridge, and suddenly Wade was there, rifle raised, aimed straight at the preacher's chest. One shot. A man fell. Elias dove, rolled, and returned fire. The air cracked with gunfire. Hooves thundered. A window shattered. And through it all, Clara crouched behind the porch beam, hand over her belly, whispering over and over, "Hold on, little one. Hold on." When the dust settled, 2 men were dead. One was running, and Elias was bleeding. A bullet lodged near his ribs. Not fatal, but deep. Clara reached him, hands shaking. "Stay with me, Eli. Stay with me. I'm here," he gasped. "Don't you dare leave me too." But he grinned weakly. "I'm too damn stubborn for that." Later, after the doctor from town had stitched Elias and the bodies had been buried under nameless stones out by the creek, Wade lit a fire and handed Clara a box. It was old. Carved with the initials J.K. inside was a stack of letters, all to her, all from Jonas. Why, why didn't he send them?" she asked. Wade looked down. "Because he didn't think he'd live long enough for you to answer." She read them that night. Every page, every crossed-out word, every plea, every apology. And when she reached the last one, her tears came, not like storms, but like rain after drought, slow, cleansing, unstoppable. Elias watched from the doorway, and in her arms her belly moved. The child would come soon. A new name, a new start, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something worth protecting. It was the fourth night after the gunfight when Clara felt the storm break inside her. Not outside, though clouds did roll heavy over the hills that evening, and the wind sang through the rafters like an old, tired woman. No, this storm came from deeper, from within. Her waters broke just after midnight. Elias was asleep in the chair near the fireplace, one arm bandaged, the other still resting on his holster. Wade had gone into town for supplies earlier that day and hadn't yet returned. Clara stood barefoot in the hallway, gripping the wall as pain surged through her. Her knees buckled. She called out, not loudly, but enough, "Elias!" He was up in an instant, limping but alert. "What is it?" She turned to him, hair clinging to her temples, breath uneven. "It's time." He froze for only a second, just one. Then, with a grim nod, he gathered what little they had, blankets, a pail, water boiled over the hearth. "Breathe, Clara. I've seen horses give birth in worse weather." She smiled, despite everything. "I'm not a horse, Eli." "No," he said, crouching beside her. "You're stronger." It took hours. Long, excruciating hours where time stretched thin as thread, and every contraction pulled tears from her eyes like nails from wood. Elias never left her side. He spoke little, but his hands never shook. Not once. Not when she screamed. Not when the blood came. Not when she said, "I can't." He only whispered, "Yes, you can." When the child came, it was silent. Too silent. Clara looked up, wild-eyed, as Elias cradled the limp red thing in his arms. For a moment, time died. Then a cough, a gasp, a cry. It was small, raw, but alive. Clara sobbed, reaching out. Elias placed the baby in her arms. "It's a girl," he said, his voice breaking. Clara looked down. The child's skin was warm bronze, her cheeks full, her eyes shut tight as if the world were too much to see just yet. She had her father's lips, and her uncle's eyes. "She's here," Clara whispered. "She made it." Elias sat beside her, staring at the miracle as if unsure whether to cry or pray. "She's got his fire," he said. "I can feel it." Wade returned 2 days later with supplies, a toothless midwife who arrived late, and a quiet warning. "Marshals from Fort Burton are asking around," he told Elias. "Not the usual ones. These are clean, smart, looking into the same judge Jonas was tied to." Elias nodded slowly. "Then the world's catching up." Wade looked at Clara, who was resting on the porch swing, baby in arms, humming something soft and half-forgotten. "She gonna be all right?" Wade asked. Elias looked toward her, then at the sky above the ridge, golden with late summer. "She already is." Later that week, Elias rode into town. Alone. He didn't wear his badge, didn't carry Jonas's gun, just brought the ledger. And the truth. It took hours, statements, questions, faces he didn't trust. But in the end, the marshals took the book, and one of them, a man with a stiff jaw and a New England accent, said to him quietly, "We've been trying to bring that circuit judge down for 6 years. You just gave us the nail." Elias tipped his hat. "Jonas gave it to you. I just carried it." Weeks passed. The baby, now named Lena after Clara's mother, grew stronger by the day. She liked the sound of the wind. And when Wade played the harmonica, she turned her head like she knew music was a kind of medicine. Elias wrote a letter one night. He didn't sign it, didn't send it anywhere, just folded it into a Bible Jonas once carried and left it in Clara's room. It read, "You were right. About love. About fear. I hated you for leaving her. But now I see you never left. Not really. You stayed in every choice she made, in every breath she fought through. In Lena's eyes. I was the one who ran. You stood your ground. I carry you now, not as a ghost, but as a brother. Rest. We've got her from here." By the first frost, Clara had taken to walking the fence line with Lena in a sling across her chest. Elias watched from the barn, arms crossed, heart heavy but lighter than it had been in years. Wade was fixing up the shed, muttering about winter wood and wild coyotes. No one talked about Jonas anymore, not like before. Now they spoke of him the way folks speak of stars. Distant, but not gone. Sometimes Clara would sit beside the fire and tell Lena about the outlaw with a gentle smile and a voice like spring thunder, about how he danced once in a saloon and got thrown out for kissing the sheriff's daughter, how he cried the night he learned he'd be a father, how he died trying to clean up a world that never gave him the chance to live right. And Lena would stare up, eyes wide, as if already knowing her story began long before she took her first breath. One night, as Elias held the baby, awkward and unsure, Clara looked at him and said softly, "You gave her a future." Elias shook his head. "Number she gave me one." And somewhere, out past the hills, beneath a sky too big to name, a hawk screamed, and the prairie rolled on, wild and endless. Just like love, just like forgiveness, just like family.